Hello, hello. Okay, so I started my classes for real estate.
Oh, great.
And so I just learned about property rights.
Yay.
So let's test Tammy on property rights.
Which, disclaimer, might be a little confusing right now in my head because I'm also testing for a different state license right now.
Okay, so
if I flub this, it's not because of really I don't know what I'm doing.
yeah, so I think this is important too because this is just a topic that as a buyer I had no idea about.
Right.
I didn't know that I owned the house, the land underneath, and that is separately and could be sold, or the house and the sky up above and that could be sold.
Or
So-
mineral rights or any of those.
Yeah. So, this is kind of like eye-opening. And if you watch Landman, that was really my first, like, what do you mean? You can sell the oil underneath your house? Like, to somebody else, and then they what is it, harvest it?
Yeah.
And like, this is totally different,
Yeah.
than what I've always thought. And I feel like a lot of these, are kind of by geographic location. Like if I sell the air above my house, nobody cares. But if somebody in New York wanted to sell the air above their building, it would be a pretty big deal because everybody's all about the view.
Right.
And,
or if it
in
was
those high rises.
beachfront,
Yeah,
then you
true.
have that same application there.
Okay, so the first one is the bundle of rights. Do you know what those 5 are?
So your bundle of rights is going to be the property itself, and that's where it's coming in with the soil below, the mineral rights, the air rights.
I don't really think so. Okay, so this is basically like what you can do with the property. So the right of control, right of enjoyment, right of disposition, right of exclusion, and right of possession. I feel like is that first bundle.
Okay.
Must be different in the other state.
Well, no, what's going to happen is that when you are taking the real estate test and you're taking the course, you're going to learn all of these things that you have to know for the test, and you never have anything to do with it in the real estate world.
Yeah.
So this is one of those things that fall into there that you really don't go down that path.
Okay. Well, let's
But
talk about it anyway.
You are in study mode, and so these things become really, really important, which is my only caveat because I take my test on Friday, that I'm cramming for a different state's test. And some different, some things are a little different, right?
Yeah.
But then there's the things that are consistent. So that part will help. But
Okay. So the first part, right of control, is that basically the owner has the right to use the property how they want to, short of like zoning laws through the
as long as they're
municipality.
legal,
Yeah.
legal use.
So, and then the right of enjoyment, that you can use it for your own leisure as long as it's lawful.
Right.
So can you give me an example of what that would be?
So if you want to put a garden in the back and just go out there and relax, sit on your deck, listen to your music, as long as it's not violating any noise ordinance or anything like that, that's the notice of peaceful enjoyment.
Okay. And then right of disposition is your ability to sell the property.
Right. So one instance that we had where we were talking about insurance, and sometimes the insurance decides that you need to get rid of this tree, but it's a protected tree. You can't cut this tree, and the city and the insurance are giving you conflict, and it's really stopping that person from being able to sell their house. That would be an example of that. So something outside of their control is saying, hey, you can't sell your house. What do you mean I can't sell my house?
Yeah.
It's mine. I get to sell it, right? So that's kind of an example there.
Okay, and then the right of exclusion is you can restrict access to your property.
Yeah, so you don't have to let the neighbor kids come into your front yard and play. You don't have to let ease of access for somebody who wants to go to the neighbor behind you to cross through your property to do that. Those are exclusions that you can make. And
So how does that work with sidewalks?
so if there's a sidewalk, while public, is your responsibility for maintenance. So if you have the sidewalk gap and somebody falls on it, they're going to sue you as the homeowner. But it's really the city's property, and so you have to work with them in order to get that resolved, depending on what caused it.
And anybody can walk up and down the sidewalk.
Anybody can walk up and down the sidewalk, but they can't walk on your driveway, and they can't cross in the side yard that goes back, right? Because you want to get to the neighbor that's behind the house. If there is in our neighborhood, we have one side of each street has a sidewalk and the other side does not have a sidewalk. So if I would choose to walk on the other side I'd be walking through people's yards. So that's not acceptable. And there's a few houses that have like a bike path, but it's still the walking path. And it's just this little narrow concrete path that goes through. It is the side yards and the backyards to get from one street to the next street. And it is ease of access. So that, because it has been kind of set up and established for access, is acceptable. Whereas if that path wasn't there, the concrete wasn't there, you'd be walking through people's yardways. Even if it's actual easement area, you wouldn't be allowed to do that.
Oh, okay. And then the last one is you are the lawful owner of the property, so right of possession.
Right.
Okay, so then beyond those, now you have property rights and natural resources, so surface rights, which is anything that's built on the land to stay on the land, right?
So the house, the storage shed, or any garage, any of that.
Yeah, so it's not like when you sell your house, you can pick up your shed and take it with you.
I mean, some people might, but you're not supposed to.
Or a pool.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, now if it's above ground pool.
Yeah, in-ground pool is what I mean.
Yeah.
Okay, and then mineral rights, and that was the one from Landman that
Yeah.
everybody knows about now that watches that.
Well, that and everything else that's going on is that, you're finding these lithium deposits and all these minerals that people really didn't realize. I mean, when we first thought about this way back, is oil, right? You're thinking of somebody's going to come out and drill. Well, that's not something we would think about in our community.
Yeah.
But Ohio actually has a large mineral right base.
Oh.
So it is something that is being talked about, and it is something that people are realizing, and maybe not in Dayton proper, but in Dayton proper, what we have is the aquifers and the access to the water. So there are rights that go with, especially when you start talking about commercial.
Oh, you're jumping ahead.
I know, that's how it happens.
With mineral rights, if you sell your mineral rights to your property and then you sell the property as a whole, do those mineral rights still gone, or do they come back as a package deal?
Depending on how that would be written, conceivably, if you're selling the mineral rights, then that's a separate. So then you're selling the real property without the rights of minerals. So there would be an exclusion on that part.
Oh, okay.
For the property.
Okay, so the next one is timber rights, which is about trees.
Yep.
Is that kind of a thing here?
If you have acreage, and let's say you found out that you had these great hardwood trees that are back there, pine trees, because pine trees used to be used for utility poles. So if you have enough wood timber that's worthwhile for somebody to come in there and it's the right type, absolutely. Bamboo is another thing that's a really big item, and it's easy to grow, and people
you get
love
like
it.
bamboo socks or sheets and pillows. Have you ever had those?
I mean, yes, but not from the bamboo in my backyard. So I don't have enough of that. But the idea is as long as it's something that people have value in, right, and they can resell it or use it for something, then you can potentially sell those rights for it.
Oh. Okay, so the next one is water rights. And I get this one kind of confused with riparian rights. So what's the difference?
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't know that I can tell you what the difference is, but your water rights, like we were talking about with the aquifer, if you're in an area where you've got that basin below you, somebody may want and need access to that. Usually that's going to be community based. It's not going to be an individual. So.
Oh, okay. So I thought more of the difference is water rights is if you have like your house is on a lake versus riparian rights. It's hard to say. Is like I live at the lake, but I'm across the street, and I'm still able
to use
the water.
Yeah.
Activities.
Yes. So, like if you have a creek in your backyard, this is an example that I have. I had a creek in my backyard, but my rear neighbor wasn't abated up close to that. So we didn't share the creek or anything, but I still only had half the right of the creek. Now, the creek, when it would rain, would be bigger. So I actually owned more of it.
Yeah.
It was kind of a weird thing. So those water rights are different in that respect.
Okay.
But the riparian right is use of, not ownership.
Okay.
That's the way I think of it.
Yeah, so this says that it is the right of the landowner to make use of a flowing body of water in contact with their property. So, like,
Caesar's Lake, your Caesar's Creek, you've got houses that'll be along one of the banks.
yeah.
So they can get in there, they can use it, but they don't own the lake.
Could they use it to modify the property to use water for, like, electric?
Not usually. Now, in the instance that you have water rights, so if I could use the part of the creek and put that on there. So, like, if you go down through Tennessee, you see the old water wheels on barns
Yeah.
and things like that. That's what they were doing. So they were using the flow
Okay.
of that there.
Okay. And then literal rights. Landowners whose property borders a large non-flowing body of water may enjoy literal water rights.
So that's kind of that under the basin that I was talking about. So they actually have literal rights to the water because it's there.
Okay. So I feel like after learning about all of these, when you buy a property, you may get more than what you even know about when you're just looking at 3 bedrooms, 2 baths.
Right. And it's going to be, those are really specific types of properties. Like if you're dealing with somebody who's looking at some acreage, then they may want to know about the timber rights. They may want to know, is there mineral rights? They may want to know about the water rights. But your typical house in a subdivision in a normal community, if that's a thing, normal, those things never really even come up for a conversation.
Unless somebody struck oil underneath.
And then it becomes everybody's business.
Right.
Yes. But again, we hear so much right now, I think, about mineral access. And so I think people are thinking about it, hey, what's the benefit to just going out and buying 10 acres of land and holding on to it? There legitimately could be potential for that. You know, we don't have the coastal line or anything like that where we start talking about the rights of building higher than and the air rights restrictions or anything like that.
Yeah.
But different communities and different places are going to have all of these things as a natural part of their conversation. So you're learning about it all because you have to know it all.
Right.
Not that you have to use it all.
Right. Which I get. And that's a lot of the classes. You learn to attest and then you have real life experience.
Yes.
But I just thought that this was interesting and then, a topic that people would be interested in because as a homeowner, as a buyer before, I had no idea about this.
Right.
So what if my neighbor struck oil? Would I be entitled to that? Then I think all this plays in.
When you just watch more Landman and see what happens in the next session, huh?
Right. I can't wait for that show to come back. If you haven't watched it, Landman on Paramount, it's very good.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today on the Real Tea Podcast. If you enjoyed the knowledge and entertainment today, please subscribe and share with your friends. We will be embarking on a journey that bridges the gap between realtors and clients, uncovering the heart and tea of real estate.